You know, people often say time heals everything. But what if the very person you built your life around is the one who shatters it right in front of your eyes? My name is Eleanor, and this is the story of how the man I loved for 22 years walked out of our home one morning, not because we fought, not because I failed, but because he found someone new, someone younger, someone he thought was better. He didn't just leave me, he replaced me, overnight. And as if betrayal wasn't enough, he brought her into our house, the one we built together. Brick by brick, he made her the new queen of a kingdom that once belonged to me. Everyone thought I'd crumble. They whispered that I'd never survive without him. Even he believed it. He flaunted her, mocked me in silence, and lived as if my existence had never mattered. But while they were busy celebrating their happily ever after, I was planning something they never saw coming. Because sometimes, revenge doesn't scream. It waits, it watches, and when the time is right, it strikes, silently, beautifully, and completely. He thought leaving me for her was his victory, until my final move left them both begging at my door. When the door closed behind him, the sound didn't just echo, it cut through the air like the last word in an argument I never agreed to have. He didn't turn back, not once. I stood frozen in the hallway, barefoot on the cold tiles, watching the man I built my life around walk away without hesitation. The morning sun poured through the curtains, warm, golden, and painfully indifferent. How could the world still glow when everything inside me had gone dark? His car started, tires rolled over the gravel, the sound grew faint, then disappeared. But the silence he left behind was louder than any goodbye. I don't remember how long I stood there, maybe minutes, maybe forever. My tea sat untouched on the table, 2 cups out of habit, one for him, one for me. But his cup stayed clean. That should have told me something long ago. We'd been married 22 years, 2 decades of dreams, of plans, of us. We built this home together, every brick, every rose bush in the garden, every creak in the wooden floor. He used to say, "This is our forever place, Ellie." But forever, it turns out, has an expiration date. It began like a whisper, late nights, at work, missed dinners, his phone always face down, the new cologne, sharp, unfamiliar, not for me. I told myself not to overthink it. He's tired, I said. He's just stressed. But deep down, I knew. You always know when love starts dying. It doesn't vanish. It fades, one heartbeat at a time. His eyes stopped searching for me across the room. His laughter, the one that used to fill our home, became quieter, shorter. And when I reached for his hand one night at dinner, he flinched, just slightly, but enough. Enough to tell me I'd already lost him. I found out the truth, not from him, but from the world. A friend, well-meaning, but one of those who thrive on the tragedy of others, showed me a picture on her phone. Him, smiling, his arm around a young woman. She looked radiant, free, confident, kind of beauty that doesn't understand loss yet. My stomach dropped, not because she was younger, but because he looked alive beside her, in a way he hadn't been with me for years. That hurt more than betrayal. To realize that he'd found joy in someone else's presence while I was still here, holding the fragments of the man I thought I knew. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it, he didn't shout, he didn't apologize, he just said, calm as stone, "I didn't plan for this to happen, Eleanor, but it did. I'm happier now." Happier, that word burned, not because he said it, but because he meant it. I could have screamed, begged, demanded an explanation, but instead, I went quiet. Sometimes silence is the only way to survive the sound of your own heart breaking. He picked up his suitcase, kissed my forehead like you'd comfort a child, and left no tears, no second glance, just finality. The weeks that followed were fog. I moved through the house like a shadow, cooked for 2, ate for 1, washed clothes that no longer smelled like him. The house, our house, had never felt so big, so empty, so cruel. And then came the whispers. Small towns never stay silent when someone falls. Poor Eleanor, they said, he found someone better. Better. That word followed me everywhere, in the grocery aisles, at church, even in the way people smiled at me, pity softening their eyes. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, asking the same question over and over. What does better even mean? You give a man your best years, your body, your dreams, and he trades them for something shiny and new. Then, one morning, fate decided I hadn't suffered enough. I was scrolling through my phone, half distracted, when a picture flashed across my screen. It was him, the man I once loved more than life, standing proudly beside her, right in front of our home, her arm wrapped around his waist, his hand resting on the porch rail I painted last spring. The caption read, "Home Sweet Home, so blessed to start our new life together." My vision blurred, my hands shook. I dropped the phone. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was invasion. He hadn't just left me, he'd replaced me in my own house. The same kitchen where I cooked his meals, the same living room where we danced on anniversaries, the same bed where I once believed love lived. Now it was theirs. For the first time, my tears stopped. Completely. Something inside me, fragile and soft, finally broke, and what replaced it was steel. That night, I sat at the dining table surrounded by papers I hadn't touched in years, tax documents, bank records, property deeds. My hands trembled as I flipped through each one, searching for something I didn't even know what. And then I found it. The house, our forever home, was still under my name, legally, entirely, mine. My breath caught. I leaned back, staring at that single sheet of paper, and for the first time in months, I smiled. It wasn't the smile of revenge yet. It was the smile of recognition, the realization that I wasn't powerless after all. I went to the mirror. My reflection looked older than I remembered, tired, hollow, haunted, but beneath the weariness, there was something else. Resolve. The wrinkles around my eyes weren't defeat, they were history, proof that I'd endured storms and still stood. I touched the glass, whispering to the woman looking back. They thought they took everything from me, but they only taught me how strong I am. And as the night deepened, plans began to form, not loud or vengeful, but quiet and precise. The kind of plans that don't need shouting, the kind that strike softly, but permanently. They thought I was broken, but broken women don't plot. They rebuild piece by piece, until they become the storm. And that night, for the first time in months, I slept, not as a victim, but as a woman who had finally remembered her worth. They say time heals all wounds. Maybe that's true for small cuts, but betrayal doesn't heal. It reshapes you. Weeks passed. Each day felt like walking barefoot on glass. Slow, quiet, painful. Every morning, I'd see them online, posting their new life like a parade. Brunches, vacations, gardens, selfies, and always our house in the background. My house. At first, every photo burned like acid. Then, slowly, the pain started turning into something sharper. Purpose. He was flaunting what he thought he owned, and I was smiling behind the curtain, knowing he was standing on ground that could crumble beneath him any second. I stopped replying to friends' pity texts. I stopped listening to the whispers. Instead, I went to work, quietly, methodically. I met with a lawyer. She was younger than me, confident, the kind of woman who didn't waste words. After reading the papers, she looked up and said, "Mrs. Hawthorne, this property is solely in your name. You could have them out in less than a month." Less than a month. I wanted to laugh, not out of joy, but disbelief. 22 years of marriage, and he never thought to put his name beside mine. Trust had made him lazy. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Not yet," I told her. She frowned. "You don't want to proceed?" I smiled faintly. "Oh, I will, but not yet. I want them comfortable first. You see, revenge isn't about rage. Rage burns too fast. True revenge, it simmers. It waits. It lets them believe they've won, until they don't. So I let them live. I let them decorate my home with new curtains, new furniture, new lies. I watched from afar, through social media, through the whispers that found their way to me. They hosted parties, invited mutual friends. He even had the audacity to post, "Finally found peace after years of pretending." Pretending, that word hit like a knife. But this time, I didn't bleed. I smiled, because pretending was exactly what I was doing now, pretending to be done, pretending to be defeated. But while they flaunted happiness, I rebuilt my foundation. I reconnected with old colleagues. I started a small consultancy from home, quiet, consistent, profitable. Money began flowing in again, my confidence, too. Every night, before sleeping, I'd open my laptop and check the deed again. It was my reminder, my anchor. I'd whisper to myself, "Patience, Eleanor, timing is everything." One afternoon, I saw them at the grocery store. She was laughing loud and carefree, clinging to his arm. He looked different, older. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe life had already started draining the shine from his new fairy tale. They didn't see me at first, but when they did, she froze. He stiffened. I simply smiled, polite, calm, collected. "Eleanor," he said, voice uncertain, "you look, well." "I am," I replied, and I meant it. I could feel her eyes studying me, searching for bitterness, for defeat, but she found none, because I wasn't broken anymore. I was reborn. They walked away quickly, their laughter quieter now, and for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt dangerous. That night, I took out a blank journal. On the first page, I wrote 2 words in neat, bold letters: final move. From that moment, everything I did had purpose. I met with a realtor, a quiet woman who asked no questions. I didn't sell the house outright, not yet. I restructured ownership, transferring parts of the property into an investment trust under my full control. It would take time for any change to register publicly, but when it did, their little empire would vanish overnight, and the beauty of it, they wouldn't see it coming. In the meantime, I played the role of peace. I even liked one of her posts, a smiling photo of them planting flowers in my front yard. People thought I'd lost my mind, but what they didn't know was that I was playing the long game. Every like, every polite smile, every word of forgiveness was just another thread in the web I was spinning around them. One evening, I received a text from him, the first in months. Him: Eleanor, I hope you're doing okay. I wanted to thank you for not making things harder. You've been graceful about everything. Graceful. That was his way of saying obedient. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "Don't worry, I'm at peace." "Truly," he replied with a simple, "That's good to hear." And I smiled, because if peace was what he thought I had, he'd soon learn what my peace really meant. The next few weeks were quiet. I focused on myself. Morning walks, journaling, meditation. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about sharpening, and every day, I got sharper. Until one night, I received a call from my lawyer. "Everything's finalized," she said. "You now have full authorization to reclaim the property whenever you wish." "Perfect," I whispered. I closed my journal that night and placed it on the shelf. Final move. The cover read: "The plan was ready. The stage was set. All that remained was timing." I've learned something about silence. It doesn't mean weakness. It's a weapon, sharper than words, stronger than anger. Months had passed since I last saw them. The town had stopped whispering about poor Eleanor. To everyone else, I was just another woman, moving on. But what they didn't see was the storm I was preparing in plain sight, because peace, my kind of peace, was never about acceptance. It was about strategy. It began with paperwork, a few signatures here, a quiet notice there. My lawyer, discreet as ever, sent documents to finalize the transfer. I didn't even have to step into that house to take it back. All I needed was a date and a seal. On paper, I was still the sole owner, but in practice, they were living there rent-free, flaunting their new life like they built it with their bare hands. I decided to change that, not abruptly. No shouting, no police, no drama. I wanted it to unravel slowly. I wanted them to feel what I felt: confusion, loss, disbelief, until it sank in that everything they had was built on the ashes of my trust, that it started small. A property tax bill redirected from my address back to theirs, an insurance cancellation notice, routine, but signed by me. A quiet inquiry to the bank about terminating the joint account he'd forgotten still bore my name. Each action seemed insignificant, but I knew where every thread led. Within weeks, cracks began to show in their perfect life. I heard it first from a friend, the same friend who'd shown me that awful picture months ago. She said, "Eleanor, you won't believe this. They're having money troubles. He's trying to sell his car." I smiled faintly. "Oh, that's unfortunate." She leaned closer. "Word is, the bank froze some of his assets. Did you hear anything?" I shook my head, calm, sipping my tea. "No, dear. I've just been taking care of unfinished business." Inside, though, I felt something electric. Not joy, not vengeance, satisfaction, the kind that comes when justice starts whispering back. Days later, he called, the first real phone call since the day he left. "Eleanor." His voice was tight, uneasy. "Did you do something with the property paperwork?" I let silence stretch for a heartbeat. Then, softly, "Why do you ask?" He exhaled. "Because I got a notice about title verification and taxes under your name. The house is our house," I corrected gently. A pause. Then, a quiet, broken, "Eleanor, please, we're living here." "I know," I said. I allowed it. He didn't understand what I meant. Not yet. But his voice cracked when he spoke again. "You wouldn't take that from me, would you?" "Take it?" I whispered. "No, darling. I'm just reclaiming what was never yours to give away." And then, I ended the call. That was the night I slept peacefully for the first time in a year. Not because I'd won, But because I'd stopped losing, a few days later, she reached out to me. Her message was polite, almost sweet. Hi Eleanor, I just wanted to reach out, woman to woman. I know things have been complicated, but maybe we can find some peace. I don't want bad blood. Peace. The word people use when they're about to drown. I replied kindly, of course, peace is all I ever wanted. You're welcome to find it wherever it doesn't belong to me. I never heard from her again. The eviction process was slow, deliberate, and perfectly legal. I didn't want spectacle. I wanted consequence. When the notice finally arrived at their door, I imagined the moment vividly. Her opening the letter, confusion turning to panic, him reading the signature mind, and realizing his new world was collapsing under the weight of the woman he underestimated. They called again. He begged this time, Eleanor, please, we have nowhere to go. We've put money into this place. It's our home now. I closed my eyes, remembering all the nights I'd cried alone in that same house. The same walls echoing my heartbreak. Home, I whispered. You should have thought of that before you made mine a stranger's. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Not truly. It was about balance. He took my dignity when he replaced me. I took his pride when I replaced his security with fear. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse him. I just followed the law, the same law that once protected him when I had nothing left. Weeks later, they were gone. The house stood empty again. When I walked through the front door, dust clung to my fingertips. The furniture was gone, but the memories, good and bad, still lived in the air. I stood in the middle of the living room, the sunlight spilling through the windows, and whispered to myself, you did it, Eleanor. You took back your story. But here's the truth. Revenge doesn't heal everything. There's still a loneliness that lingers. A quiet ache when you walk through a house too big for one person. But that ache isn't weakness anymore. It's proof that I survived. A few months later, I put the house up for sale. Not because I needed the money, but because I was ready to let go. The day it sold, I drove by one last time, parked by the old oak tree, watched the sun dip over the roof. And then, as I turned the key in the ignition, I saw them, standing at the end of the driveway, worn out, desperate. Him, the man who once thought leaving me was victory. Her, the woman who once believed she'd won the prize. They stood there, watching me drive away, as the for sale sign swung in the wind. And in that moment, I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel pride. I just felt free. It was a crisp morning, the kind where the sun rises slowly, spilling golden light across everything it touches. I was sipping tea on my balcony, notebook in hand, jotting down plans for my next project, Rebuild Her, the small women's empowerment initiative I'd started. Then came the knock. At first, I didn't think anyone could be at my door. Visitors were rare. My neighbors knew I kept to myself. Another knock, sharper this time. I set the notebook aside, smoothed my sweater, and walked to the door. When I opened it, there they were, Samuel, Clara, both looking small, not physically small, but diminished, shrunk by their own arrogance, by their failure, by the consequences they never imagined. He looked at me first, the man who once held my hand as we dreamed of forever, the man who thought leaving me was victory. Eleanor, his voice faltered. Please, we need your help. I blinked. The words sounded foreign in my ears. Need help. From me. Clara tugged at his arm, whispering frantically. She was no longer confident, no longer radiant in effortless beauty. Her smiles were thin, forced, her hands shook. I didn't speak immediately. I just observed every twitch, every hesitation, every faltering breath. They had spent months living in a dream they thought was untouchable, and it had all crumbled. He stepped forward, holding out his hands. We don't know what to do. The house, the bills, everything. We've lost it all. Please, Eleanor, help us. I felt a strange calm wash over me. My first instinct was disbelief. Then, I felt the years of pain, humiliation, and patience crystallize into clarity. I took a deep breath. You built your life on my trust, I said softly, on my patience, and you thought it was yours to take. And now, you've lost it. He looked down, ashamed. We didn't mean for this. Clara's voice cracked. We were desperate, Eleanor. Please, just a little help. We won't ask again. I studied them, quiet, unmoving. The choice lay before me. I could let them suffer, let them feel the full weight of their arrogance. Or I could show them something more powerful than revenge, something no money or control could ever teach, dignity. You've learned the hardest lesson life can teach. I said finally, that taking what isn't yours doesn't make you happy, and begging for forgiveness doesn't erase what you did. They nodded, heads bowed, tears in her eyes, shame etched into his face. Then, I did something unexpected. I will help you, I said, but on one condition. You leave and you never return to this house, this life, or the mistakes you've repeated. You start over. And this time, you do it right. They swallowed hard. Disbelief mingled with relief. We will, he stammered. Thank you. Thank you so much. I closed the door gently. No gloating, no vindication, just calm. And as I leaned against the door, I realized the truth. Revenge isn't always about making them suffer. It's about reclaiming yourself and teaching the lesson in the quietest, most unforgettable way. That night, I sat in my living room, lights low, candle flickering. I reflected on the journey, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the silent planning, the patience, and finally, the power. I didn't feel hatred anymore. I didn't feel anger. I felt free. I learned that true victory isn't in making them fall. It's in standing tall after they tried to break you. And I did. I was no longer the woman who had cried silently in the kitchen. I was the woman who had survived, rebuilt, and reclaimed her life. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, smiling softly, they thought leaving me was their victory. But my life, my freedom, my dignity, that was my final move. The first weeks after the final confrontation were quiet, too quiet. At first I thought I'd feel relief. I thought the storm of emotions would dissipate. But peace, as I discovered, is not always immediate. It is subtle, slow, and sometimes lonely. I woke up one morning and looked at my reflection in the mirror. The lines on my face were sharper than I remembered. My eyes were tired, but they held a spark I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was waking up to a new version of myself, a woman they would never recognize. Not because of revenge, but because of strength. That I began small, a walk at dawn, a notebook, and a pen. That was all I needed to start. Every day, I wrote down what I wanted my life to be, not what I had lost, not what had been stolen, but what I could build. I started reconnecting with old friends who had drifted away over the years, not the ones who gossiped, not the ones who whispered pity in my ears, but the ones who truly mattered. These were women who had lived, struggled, and survived, like me. Their stories, their resilience, lit a fire inside me. Soon, I started taking courses online, learning about financial management, investing, and entrepreneurship. I poured my energy into learning, not hating. Knowledge became my weapon, sharper and more enduring than any rage. I discovered a truth that no betrayal could take from me. I still had myself. The idea began as a whisper in my mind, a way to help women who, like me, had been underestimated, betrayed, or left broken. I called it Rebuild Her. It started in a small room at the local library, 5 chairs, 5 women, and me at the head of the table. They all had stories of heartbreak, betrayal, or loss. Stories I knew well. I shared mine first, not to frighten, but to show them survival is possible. By the second week, more women joined. I taught them about property rights, financial literacy, and how to stand firm when the world tries to knock you down. Every time a woman left that room with a little more confidence, a little more spark in her eyes, I felt a surge of power, not over anyone else, but over my own life. This was revenge of the quietest, strongest kind, rising above, building something meaningful, and transforming pain into purpose. But life wasn't all calm and growth. Sometimes, memories hit like lightning. I'd drive past the old house we once shared. It was sold now. The new owners had no idea of the storms that had raged inside those walls. I'd feel a flash of anger, a stab of loss. Social media was a cruel reminder sometimes. A friend tagged me in a post, Samuel and Clara, looking happier than ever, smiling in a cafe. But when I looked closer, I noticed subtle cracks. He looked older, tense. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I simply watched silently, knowing I had been right all along. They had taken what was mine, and yet, somehow, life was already teaching them lessons I didn't have to deliver personally. There is a satisfaction in witnessing justice quietly unfold, without raising your voice, without retaliation. It is far more enduring than anger ever is. As Rebuild Her expanded, I began hosting workshops in neighboring towns. Women came from miles away, seeking advice, mentorship, and the courage to stand up. I would start each session by saying, You cannot control the choices of others, but you can control what you do after they hurt you. They would nod, some crying quietly, others holding my hand, and in those moments, I felt the deepest joy because every story I heard reminded me of my own survival, my own rise. With time, the workshops turned into a small nonprofit organization. Grants were applied for, donations arrived, local media began noticing. I was no longer the woman left behind. I was a beacon, a guide, a symbol of resilience and transformation. And yet, I never forgot the house, the betrayal, the nights I cried in silence. Those memories weren't poison anymore, they were fuel. One rainy evening, after a long day of workshops, I returned to my small apartment. I opened the door and dropped my bag. On the kitchen counter was an envelope, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a letter. Eleanor, I hope this finds you well. I wanted to say I was wrong. All of it. I lost everything I thought mattered. Clara left. I realized how foolish I was. I can't ask for forgiveness, but I wanted you to know, you were right. Samuel, I smiled softly. No anger, no triumph, just understanding. He didn't know it, but I had already won. Not because of property, not because of revenge, but because my life had become bigger, stronger, and brighter than his ever could be. That night, I sat by the window, watching the rain, and for the first time, I felt truly free. I learned something vital during those years. Revenge is not destruction. Revenge is becoming so powerful that the ones who broke you can only watch from the shadows. Every late night I spent learning, every woman I mentored, every project I completed, it was all part of my quiet, unstoppable comeback. The world tried to define me by my heartbreak, by the man who left, by the home that was stolen, by the betrayal that could have crushed me, but I defined myself by my resilience, my choices, and my refusal to be broken. The world responded, opportunities came, recognition came, success came, not as a gift from anyone, but as a reward for surviving, planning, and rising. One evening, sitting alone in my favorite armchair, I realized something profound. He thought leaving me was victory. He thought taking my home, flaunting his happiness, replacing me, that it would destroy me. But in the end, it didn't. He didn't know it, but he had given me everything I ever needed, the chance to rediscover myself, to build something greater than any home or marriage. The storm he created became my foundation, the heartbreak he caused became my compass, and the betrayal he committed became the fuel for my fire. I had risen from the ashes. I still walk past the old house sometimes. The sun hits the windows at the same angle it did when we first moved in. I remember the pain. I remember the anger. But now, I only smile, because I know something Samuel and Clara will never understand. You can take a person's possessions, their comfort, even their life as it once was, but you cannot take their will to rise, their strength to rebuild, or their soul's fire. That is something no betrayal can ever touch, and that is the woman they never saw coming. The morning air was crisp, carrying a quiet promise. I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the sunlight spill over the rooftops of the town that had once whispered about me behind my back. There was a certain stillness that came after storms, a calm that felt almost alien. I had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and humiliation. I had faced the man who thought leaving me was victory. I had reclaimed my life, my home, my dignity. And yet, even with all that, I understood that freedom was not something you simply claimed. It was something you lived, every day, with intention and courage. I thought back to the months following their departure. I had rebuilt myself piece by piece, each moment of effort a brick in a foundation stronger than any house, stronger than any marriage, stronger than any betrayal. The workshops, the nonprofit, the women I had guided, they were all reflections of the woman I had become. I had turned my pain into purpose, my silence into strategy, and my heartbreak into a fire that nothing could extinguish. In helping others rise, I had risen even higher. One evening, after a particularly fulfilling workshop, I walked home, under a sky washed in orange and purple hues. The wind carried the scent of autumn leaves, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace in my own skin. Yet, even peace has a way of reminding you of the past. I passed the old street where my former home once stood, now sold to a new family. The familiar oak tree still towered over the driveway, but everything else had changed. It was no longer mine, and yet, somehow, it didn't matter. I realized then that home isn't just a building. Home is the life you create. the people you touch, the strength you cultivate. And I had built a home within myself that no one could take away. Weeks turned into months, and with every passing day, I felt the subtle beauty of independence. I traveled to nearby cities, speaking at events, meeting women who shared pieces of my story. Each face reminded me of the universal truth: pain is temporary, but resilience is eternal. I remember one young woman, barely 22, who confided that her partner had left her and taken everything she thought was hers. I held her hands and said, "You are not defined by what you lose. You are defined by what you do next." Her tears were mirrors of my own, and yet, in that moment, they also became a testament to the power of survival. I began to notice changes in myself that went beyond business success or social recognition. I laughed freely again, genuinely, not because I was ignoring the past, but because I had learned to embrace life fully, without fear of betrayal. I woke up early and ran through the quiet streets, feeling the earth beneath my feet, the wind in my hair. Every step was a declaration. I was alive, I was strong, and I was free. The fire that had once burned with anger had evolved into a warmth that nurtured ambition, compassion, and self-love. It was during one of these morning runs that I realized how far I had come. I passed a cafe and saw Samuel sitting with Clara, older, weary, faces lined with regret. I didn't stop. I didn't acknowledge them. I didn't need to. They were living a version of life they had chosen, and I was living mine. And mine was overflowing with possibility, strength, and dignity. The sight of them didn't ignite hatred. Instead, it reinforced my understanding that true power is quiet, unyielding, and unapologetically self-contained. There were letters from Samuel, from Clara, from people connected to our old lives. They apologized, confessed their mistakes, begged for advice. I read each one carefully, letting their words wash over me without affecting my equilibrium. Forgiveness was no longer a gift I gave lightly, nor was it necessary for my peace. I realized that forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the burden of anger, not absolving others of their actions. I folded the letters neatly, placing them in a drawer, symbolic of the closure I had cultivated internally. The most profound shift came the day I received an invitation to speak at a women's empowerment summit in another city. As I prepared my notes, I reflected on my journey. I could tell them everything: the heartbreak, the betrayal, the nights of tears and solitude, but the story that resonated the most was the transformation. I spoke not just to those attending, but to every woman who had ever felt invisible, powerless, or abandoned. I spoke about strengths, strategy, and the reclamation of one's own life. And as I watched the audience lean forward, some crying, some nodding in recognition, I understood the deepest satisfaction. My story had become more than a tale of betrayal. It had become a beacon of hope. I began mentoring women, one-on-one, guiding them through legal battles, financial crises, and emotional recovery. Each success, each life touched, reinforced a truth that had taken years to fully comprehend. The most profound revenge is not destruction, but the complete reclamation of your own life and spirit. Samuel and Clara had tried to take my happiness, my home, and my peace. They had failed, and yet I had surpassed mere victory. I had thrived. Even in solitude, I found joy. There were quiet evenings when I would sit by the window, candlelight flickering against the walls, tea in hand, notebook open, pen poised to capture thoughts. I wrote about the woman I had been, the woman I had become, and the woman I would continue to grow into. Every word was a testament to survival, courage, and the relentless pursuit of self. The house no longer defined me. The betrayal no longer chained me. I was, in every sense, my own masterpiece. I recall a particular afternoon, sitting in a park under a vast canopy of maple trees, watching children play. A young mother approached me nervously, asking for advice about leaving a partner who had betrayed her. I listened, offered guidance, and watched the relief wash over her face. In that moment, I understood the final lesson of my journey. Healing is not just for yourself. It is for the lives you touch, the wisdom you share, the courage you ignite in others. My survival had become their strength, and their strength became mine, reflected back in ways I could not have imagined. Evenings became my sanctuary. I would light candles, let soft music play, and reflect on my journey with Samuel and Clara, on the life I had reclaimed, and on the purpose I had found. I no longer felt the need for confrontation, for acknowledgement, or for validation. The world could continue as it wished. I was complete within myself, I think back to the moment I finally let go of anger. It was a quiet Sunday morning. I walked along the riverbank near the old part of town, leaves crunching beneath my feet. The wind was cool against my face, the sun warm on my shoulders. I whispered to the woman I had once been, "You survived. You endured. You built a life that no one can take from you." And then I whispered to the world, "I am free." That freedom was more potent than revenge. It was more rewarding than any fleeting satisfaction. It was permanent. The storm Samuel had created became the wind beneath my wings. The betrayal became a mirror, reflecting not my weakness, but my infinite strength. The pain became a teacher, and I became a master of my own destiny. I often sit now in the quiet of my home, surrounded by books, journals, and mementos of a life rebuilt. The windows frame the sunset perfectly. Each breath I take is deliberate, full, and unburdened. I have created a sanctuary within myself, one that no one can penetrate, no one can steal, and no one can diminish. The final realization comes softly, without fanfare. The woman they thought they destroyed is the woman who will outshine them forever. They believed victory lay in betrayal, in theft, in replacing me, but victory, I discovered, was in survival, in transformation, and in rising above. And as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting golden light over the town that once whispered my defeat, I know with absolute certainty that I have won in the only way that matters, with dignity, power, and unshakable peace. And in that quiet triumph, I smile, not with vengeance, not with bitterness, but with freedom, because I am no longer the woman who waited for someone else to define her happiness. I am the woman who built her own, and in doing so, became unstoppable, unbreakable, and unforgettable.